Okay, guys, so we're back, and we previously were discussing the selection tools in Adobe Illustrator, but what we were discussing were how the selection tools actually worked in the older version. So now we're going to discuss how they work in the newer version. So we select an object using the button or the selection tool, which is the first icon, and we can move our object around. We can use our anchor point direct selection tool, and we can move these direct selections of those specific anchor points. And remember, we can select more than one. They don't even have to be in the same area, and we can shift and pull and change how they look. And then we have our Lasso tool, which allows us to select multiple anchor points, but not having to be restricted to a rectangular marquee. We can use an organic marquee that specifies whatever the shape is of our object and wherever our anchor points are. And we have our group selection, which, if you're not familiar, you can just simply go back and look at our previous tutorial and figure out what the group selection does. But essentially, it lets you select points that are separate on multi-pathed objects. Okay? Now, I don't know if you noticed, when I initially selected the direct selection tool and I highlighted this, like, let's use our regular selection tool, but if we were to select direct selection, notice now the difference is there are these little points that are inside our rectangle. Now, these points will show up even if you individually select anchor points, but if you select all of them, they're all going to be there. Now, here's the benefit of these points. These allow you to round your corners. It almost null and voids. It makes obsolete the rounded corners function. In my opinion, you don't need it anymore. A lot of people would use that to round out their corners on objects. If you had stars or a triangle and you wanted certain things to round on the edges, that's how you would do it, rounded corners. Or you would just use a shape builder and build the shape differently. But here we can now click on these little circles that are on the inside, and when we drag them, you'll notice how it starts to change to rounded corners. Now, if we let it go, we have perfectly rounded corners. Like, this is awesome. As you're dragging, you'll notice in your upper corner of your panel, your options panel, there is a live corners option box. This essentially tells you the radius of your corner when you're changing it. So you'll look and you'll notice that that starts to change the further out you get. You let it go, we have 0, here we have 44, and it's just a bunch of different things you could do. If you want more options, you can actually click the corners box and or double click on any of the corners, and then you can select whether you want your corner to be round, inverted round, or a chamfered angle. And let's take a look at these. Let's go with an inverted round and start. Well, let's go round first, and let's look at what it does. You'll notice how it rounds out according to a 30-point radius on these corners. But let's invert it. And now it cuts in the opposite direction. See how this looks like a ticket now? And then we can simply do a chamfer angle, which is more like a bevel, and it just clips it at those angles. It is super intuitive. It's very easy, but it's an option that did not come with your select tools in the previous versions of Illustrator. So let's go back to rounded corner, and let's choose a different type of rounding. There's absolute and there's relative. And we click relative, and you'll notice, better yet, I'll show you on a different shape what the relative cornering does. Let's go and let's make a star. And we will do it like this, and then we'll select, and then we will double click and open our corners, and we'll move this, and we will slowly change the shape. But you notice, right now it's on absolute. If we were to click, and maybe we can get in a little closer for you so you can see better. Let's open these corners back up. if you were to select absolute, this is how we look. But if you pay attention, it's going to jut out a little bit more, just like the icon suggests, in relative. See? It gives it more of an extension. It's almost how your endpoints work when you're doing stroke adjustments and you choose to, let's say we add a stroke and we were to choose to use a projecting cap. Think of it like that for the relative and absolute. It's like that, but you're using that with respect to corners. And again, you can change these to however you like. You can bring them all the way back and make them straight. Again, you can double click and you can go in and change the types and make them an inverted round, or you can chamfer them, and you have these options. But there are a ton of options with these select tools. One of the last options is when using the select tool, you'll notice that, let's say we have this shape, and better yet, let's create a shape with the pen tool. We're going to create this line and shape here. And if we were to use the direct selection tool, notice we have our corners, but let's say we came to a rounded corner. Now we can grab that specific segment and we can drag it and reshape that segment. And it keeps everything fluid, almost like our reshape tool did. And if you're not familiar with that, go and look into our transform tools tutorial and you'll find out how to utilize the reshape tool. But this, using the direct selection, allows us to move these line segments while keeping the overall shape of the actual form. So it's super beneficial. You just want to make sure that when you're doing this, you're really cognizant of how you're manipulating your actual shape itself. You don't want to get your angles and your anchor points and your handles all screwy, but just make sure that you're sticking with it and you're manipulating it in the actual right way. But it's very simple and they're very helpful techniques. So make sure that you get familiar with these and get familiar with the older ones, so that way you can see the differences and check them out. Utilize them in your work and make sure that you're taking advantage of these. Okay, so I'll see you guys in our next tutorial. Take it easy.